Episode 10 opens with a slightly modified version of Ranger's approach to Oniyuri. Modified in that RWBY isn't stupid this time around, thinking walking cross-continent will take about 2 weeks. Thankfully, our modified "the trains are out of service" setup fixes that so we can modify her dialogue to more or less groan about how the trip was only supposed to take, like, 2 weeks max, and now it's turned into a month walk cross-country. All things being fair, there's not much else being changed, up until Ren starts really talking about the colonies that broke away from Mistral. When he mentions Mountain Glen, we change his phrasing from Anima's Mountain Glen to one of Anima's Mountain Glens. Because, come on, there's clearly multiple villages trying this experiment, why are you referring to Oniyuri as the only one? It's kind of weird. Additionally, when asked what happened, Shion immediately comes to mind for the rest of them. Bandits, Grimm, and Ren tightens his hand when he mentions one Grimm in particular, leading to confused stares from Ruby and John. Golden leaves swirl past the camera, transitioning us into Weiss's room. We get a mostly unchanged scene involving Weiss being scolded by Jacques, at least in tone. He chides her for making a mess of the gala, and in fact makes it absolutely firm that their deal is off, meaning she won't be seeing Winter anytime soon. He's even more pissed about this because now he has to follow through with Ironwood to save face and keep his reputation of honoring deals. She wasted precious time he could have been using to build political capital. Weiss makes her declaration that she wants to leave Atlas. Jacques declares that they're not talking about Weiss right now. This whole mess is about the family name, and Weiss in a heated moment asks if Mr. Julie liked his song, which earns her a good old-fashioned slapping as a result. You know, fun times for all. She declares her goal to leave and uphold the family name as a huntress, and Jacques shuts her down hard, even stripping her of her inheritance. When Jacques leaves, Weiss finds Whitley just outside, who is smug as all hell about being named the new heir, declaring that he is all in on listening to Daddy Dearest. Instead of being stunned and passive about this in the hallway, Weiss is now in her doorway and slams the door on Whitley's face. Because that's all the catharsis we're going to get out of that dynamic this whole volume. Returning to her room, she falls onto her bed and has a good cry. Then, when the cry has been well and goodly had, she sees a pair of airships fly past the window. She stands and pulls Naster out from under her bed, the box covered in a thin layer of dust. Without moving any furniture, because any more square footage in that room and it'll classify as a goddamn gymnasium, she poses with her weapon, loads a chamber, and closes her eyes in concentration. From a low angle, we track past the open box for Naster. We transition to an open suitcase where Ilya is packing for her trip to Menagerie. Behind her, just coming into frame, we can see Adam leaning on the doorframe. Ilya catches him out of the corner of her eye and only spares him a glance before she continues packing. She entreats that if he's going to talk, he should probably start now. Adam says he needs her to deliver a message to Fennec and Corsic. He wanted to hand it over in person, but he supposed that this was a blessing in disguise because he has a lot of work to get done in Mistral while Ilya is gone. He hands her a data chip containing the message, and she takes it, looking at it a moment before adding it to her suitcase, agreeing out loud as well. There's a quiet between them before he asks, "You know what has to be done, right? Bring her home." Ilya quickly replies that she didn't need him to tell her that. She's also confident she'll be able to convince Blake to return. Adam laughs at her, but Ilya comments that she's seen Adam's tactics. Always the horns with him, never the hand. Ilya knows how to have finesse, and she's sure that she can make Blake see clearly just by talking with her. That gets Adam laughing even more, and he points out that humans have filled her head with too much crap. She shouldn't be surprised if Blake resists, and she shouldn't be afraid to resort to whatever means she needs in order to bring Blake home, willing or not. Ilya snaps that she's not going to attack a friend, but Adam growls that Blake isn't so kind considering she more than willingly attacked him, and he points out that he and she were closer than anyone. That gets under Ilya's skin, and she bites her tongue. With her packing finished, she zips up her case and heads to the door. Before she walks out, Adam grabs her forearm and whispers in her ear, "Big changes are coming, Ilya. Remember where your loyalties lie. Not to a leader, but to a cause." Ilya tries to pull away, and he lets her. She moves a few steps away from him and holds where he grabbed her, muttering weakly, "I'm loyal to the Fang. It doesn't matter who's in charge." As the camera goes black. Back with Team Ranger, we get Tyrion's initial attack. The only real tweak is Ruby's meek, "Me?" response when Tyrion points to her. Instead, she's a little more aggressive, a little more concerned, a little less confused. Though, still confused. Remember, this guy is a complete stranger to both her and us at this point. But the rest of the scene plays out like before, Crow rushing in to save Ruby and all that. Crow says, "Hey," and the camera cuts to black. Episode 11 opens back on the farm, which has fallen eerily quiet. We slowly pan upon Remus walking through the central yard carrying 2 backpacks stuffed with supplies. He looks tired, the bags under his eyes heavy. He approaches one of the houses and simply pushes the unlocked door open, as though it had been left ajar. He works his way upstairs and opens the door to Avantine's room, where he sets both backpacks near the door. Remus approaches Ave's bed and begins speaking in a somewhat panicked tone. He says that something is wrong, that no one is waking up, so he started packing travel bags so they could leave together. He even snuck into her grandpa's storeroom to get that jam that she likes, even though the cellar scares him. His words are shaky, as if he already knows that when he reaches out to touch her, her skin will be cold and she won't be breathing. Slowly coming to grips with the realization, Remus spends a minute fighting back tears and choking down sobs before he manages to compose himself, though it's very clear he's nowhere near stable. We don't see him leave the room, we only cut to near the door where the 2 packs were laid to rest, one of which remains and the other is now absent. Outside, we see Remus walking away from the farm, sparing it one last look before continuing on his way. Though slightly more distant, the well lingers prominently in the center of the frame. Our transition fades in on Beacon Tower, being viewed from a tent on the airship dock by Team Coffee, who are having a cup of... coffee, to wind down after a long day of fighting. Despite the evident exhaustion, they appear to be in better spirits, especially when Fox mentions he overheard a different team mention Professor Peach's group managed to secure the cafeteria once and for all. Velvet lets out a sigh of relief, remarking that it's almost over. Yatsuhashi smiles at her, but it sours when he looks over at the Wyvern, still perched firmly atop the tower. He comments that unless they find a way to remove or destroy the Wyvern, the campus will never quite be safe. Velvet just drawls in a self-deprecating tone that it's certainly not for a lack of trying. Coco, who's working on her gun, comments that they'll figure it out, even if it means destroying the whole tower and using a crane to drag the damn thing away from Vale. Fox just sits back languidly and says that he's happy they're not going to be around for that job. Velvet corrects him, saying that they might not be around for the job. Their applications haven't been approved yet. He fires back, "What are they gonna do? Reject us? Knock us back a year? You're underestimating how relaxed things are in Vacuo. More than likely they'll just throw us in with the third years and tell us to sink or swim. And frankly, I'm pretty good at the butterfly paddle at this rate." "Butterfly stroke," Yatsu corrects him. "Whatever," he says back. Velvet sighs back at him, scratching at the end of her half ear. She admits she feels like they're abandoning their post, but Coco quickly rebuffs that, saying that they're still in training. They were never meant to be on a job this big. They've been thrown into the deep end and they've been improvising, but they were never given the time to learn how to deal with something like this. Not even Lower Karen could have prepared them for this. At the mention of Karen, the team goes quiet. Coco sees this and stands, declaring that when they get to Shade, they'll ace their classes, kick the crap out of their missions, and make sure that nothing like Karen or Beacon ever happens to anyone ever again. Further, she sneers, if they ever get their hands on the bastards that did this to their school, they would make them pay, slamming her fist into her palm. From there, we transfer smoothly to Tyrion's tail buffering up against Crow's sword. What follows is the same Tyrion and Crow fight we all know and love. There are some small tweaks, like RWBY actually, aiming for Tyrion, and him leaning into the bullets with the same absent-minded glee as the original to demonstrate his more masochistic nature. Overall though, until the end, this is a very solid fight scene. At the conclusion, when RWBY goes to cut Tyrion, she actually aims for his head, and his only reaction is to use his tail to knock the attack off course, which ends with his stinger being cut off entirely. Wounded, the rest of Ranger move in to apprehend him, and when he tries to flee, Nora and Ren unload on him. He manages to duck behind cover to avoid Ren's shots, and when the team pushes forward to get him, he catches one of Nora's grenades to throw it back at the team, providing enough cover for him to finally escape. The rest of the scene plays out as normal, with the crew questioning Crow on who the man was and him asking what their favorite fairy tale is. Personally, my favorite fairy tale is the calming story that I have so many wonderful patrons. Seriously, have I ever said you guys are the best? Because you guys are the best. And if you, uninitiated viewer, also want to be the best, consider supporting me on Patreon as well. For $1 or more, you get access to the Team Frostbite Discord server, The Tundra, where I, as well as other YouTube personalities, interact with our fans on the regular. Additionally, new patrons get a shout out in every full new video, like this Fixing RWBY series or one of my other reviews. I can't wait to see you guys in the Tundra when you sign up. But enough of pleasant fantasies, back to the video. Starting episode 12, we find Remus in a Mistrali Berg, visibly gaunt and tired. His pack is empty and he wanders a busy street, his presence unacknowledged by the passers-by unless he bumps into them. He passes an open market and sees the food on display, making his mouth water, but after checking his pockets he finds no money. He stands in place, his face conveying a rising sense of panic and desperation, and it's only when he catches another kid pickpocketing some adults that his face begins to still. He shadows the kid and winds up in a back alley where a small cadre of friends are pulling their own ill-gotten gains together. He approaches the kids, weak, and asks them to spare a few coins. The friends, being asshole pricks, most of which are Faunus, ask him who the hell he thinks he is, shoot him down, and tell him to get lost. He pleads again, and again the kids rebuff him, with one even taking an aggressive stance to intimidate Remus. Instead, Remus cries one last time that he needs the money before lurching forward and punching the kid trying to intimidate him. In the shadows, we see Remus and the kids fighting, beating the ever-living snot out of each other before only Remus remains standing. He collects the lien from the ground and puts it in his own coin pouch. He's leaving the alley when the biggest kid asks who he is. He pauses, still winded from the fight, bruised, tired, and hungry, and in a moment he closes his eyes to steady himself. He opens them again, declaring, "My name is Roman Torchwick, and these streets are mine now. Everything you steal comes to me, or else." And now we transition to... Christ. Hey, can I maybe, just skip this and come back? Oh, we have to do this in chronological order, do we? Well, dandy. Okay, so we transition to Ranger around the campfire being caught up on what the hell is going on exactly. We don't lead in with Crow asking about there not being any questions. That single line opens this whole scene up to redundancy since the kids would logically just be asking for repeated information. Instead, we get Nora simply asking, "So these maidens, there are 4 of them, and they all control different elements?" Crow corrects her that yes, there are 4 of them, but they all just have blanket magic powers. They're named after the different seasons, but it's more of a title than anything reflecting their ability. Ren naturally follows that up by asking why the maidens haven't been used to protect the world, to which Crow responds that they're powerful, but they're still mortal, and keeping close tabs on who becomes a maiden is important. Theoretically, a random mugger could come up to a maiden, jump her with a knife while looking into her eyes, and boom, the mugger becomes a maiden. Worst case scenario, someone from the other side could get the power, and that could lead to disastrous consequences. He mentions the last time one of the maiden powers went to a baddie, and the Great War soon followed. If the maiden hadn't been killed by the Yellow Brick Bunch's secret organization back then, the results could have been apocalyptic. After that, they made it a goal to train maidens to keep an intended target in the back of their minds just in case they get surprised and killed. But Cinder, or Ash, or whatever her name was, the woman responsible for the Vital Festival tournament disaster, she found a way to get around the system without killing the maiden. She managed to surprise him and Amber and siphon off part of her power, leaving her comatose. Worried they might lose the power to Cinder, they looked for a new candidate, and this is where John jumps in to finish Crow's sentence, realizing they were using the machine to transfer Amber's maiden power into Pyrrha. They forced it on her. Crow is quick to come to Osmond's defense, however, saying they gave Pyrrha the options and laid out all of the facts. She could have walked away at any time. She made a choice. John snarls back that it was in the heat of the moment, she wasn't in her right mind, she had just killed someone for all she knew. Crow raises his voice and says that she made a sacrifice play that could have saved lives for all she knew. In the moment, it was the right call. John clenches his jaw and stands, walking away from the fire for a brief period. Ruby fills the gap asking about Tyrion and why he was after her. Crow goes on to say that having silver eyes is rare for a reason. It's a powerful weapon against the Grimm, and the forces against them took great pains to whittle down the numbers from small to almost non-existent. The fact Ruby managed to use her eyes at the top of the tower sounded an alarm bell that put a target squarely on her back. Ruby then asked the logical question, if she's so important, why hasn't he been traveling with them the entire time? To which John surmises Crow was using them as bait. He of course says it was more complicated than that, but John just goes off on him, about Ruby being hunted, schools being attacked, and none of the kids knowing what is even happening anymore. Crow tells him to cool it and sit down before asking how religious all the kids are. All but Ren shrug, and Ren explains he follows the 3 pillars of Tonfuism pretty closely. Crow asks if there's a creation myth to it, which Ren says most people use it as more of a philosophy than a religion, so myths have fallen by the wayside. Crow hums and smiles, stating it's good because what he's about to tell them isn't going to hurt anyone's faith. Because, the way Oz tells it, there's only one creation narrative that's correct. And this is where we launch into the creation narrative of the show, which is surprisingly unchanged, because honestly it fits the unreliable narrator thing Ozpin has going on. He's not giving the full details to his recruits and in fact misleading them. The only thing to change about this explanation is when Ren asks what this has to do with any of them, since, learning the origin of your enemy might be important to the profession you've been trained to do. But the gods, the relic origins, the purpose of the schools, all those lines are just about fine. I think maybe the only tweak we need is that it's the teachers who guard the relics, not the students. The students aren't in on it, but the teachers, who are the best of the best huntsmen, are, which is why the academies are basically hubs for superb huntsmen. The end of this explanation is also where Crow drops Salem's name as the big bad they're trying to keep the relics away from. Replacing Ren's line about what this has to do with them, he asks the next logical step. Why doesn't anyone know about this? Why just a secret society and an underground war? Crow points first to his explanation of the maidens, but then talks about how people would just flat not believe it. A malignant being who happens to be the source of so many ills in the world, one that has been plaguing humanity for centuries? Even if they had the maidens parading in the streets doing a fireworks show with their magic, it'd be a hard premise to swallow. Hell, it took Crow years to realize the old man wasn't just blowing smoke about her, and he considers himself one of Oz's most loyal allies. With people relying more and more on the CCT for world news, they were actually discussing possibly creating a terrorist threat to blame for her actions to slowly inoculate the populace to her. But then Amber got injured before any of that could happen, throwing their plans for a loop. RWBY asks what Salem's endgame is, and Crow isn't quite sure since Oz was always very tight-lipped about that. But he knows one thing. She's trying to divide humanity, and so far she's done a bang-up job of it. If they let her succeed, it's more than likely they'll have another great war on their hands like last time, and their loved ones would be in the crosshairs just as much as the people trying to stop Salem. Nora asks if they should be double-timing it to Mistral if that's the case, but Crow assures her that there is time. After the attack, Lionheart will be on the lookout for problems, though it does concern Crow that the team they encountered, that being Cinder, Emerald, and Mercury, seem to have come from Mistral. There's no mention of Leo being out of touch with Ozpin or Crow in this version. Regardless, another attack like Beacon would be just as slow to organize, especially with the White Fang under an incredibly tight microscope from world leaders. Crow stands and dusts himself off, and decides to call it a night, and this is where we get a breakdown of his semblance. No real changes here, this is okay for the most part, except for his use of, "My semblance isn't like most," which is entirely redundant to the concept of semblances. Someone's semblance could be making great potato salad. Semblances are kind of random like that. That's sort of the point. Anyway, the scene ends as normal with Crow off for a walk saying there's nothing else he'd like to tell them tonight. Back at Shinee Manor, Klein arrives outside of Weiss's room and speaks to her through the door. He's carrying a tray of food and he notices a similar, empty tray outside the door already. He expresses that he's concerned for her since she's kept herself locked away for several days now and hasn't come out. He's happy that she's been getting the nutrients she needs, but living life behind a lock isn't much of a life at all, even if her father was being a touch unreasonable. He doesn't get a response, and he sets the tray down, saying that it's there for her when he hears breaking glass. Dropping the tray halfway, Klein bursts through the door into the room without a second thought, worry about Weiss powering him through it. Inside, he finds Weiss, sweaty, ragged, and wearing more casual clothing. In front of her is a summoned armor Gygas, which bends its knee to her as she smiles. She turns to Klein and says that she needs a favor. Back with Ranger, we get Crow's poisoning kicking into high gear and him passing out, ending the episode. Episode 13 opens in the White Fang's menagerie office, in particular Fennec and Corsica's little shrine area somewhere near the back. The two are praying at their altar when Trifa, that once spider faunus, informs them that Sister Ilya has arrived. The two share a glance and stand to meet her. Outside, we find Ilya getting warm greetings from Yuma and Trifa, who she shares hugs with, implying some level of friendship. Fennec and Corsica greet her cordially and go through the generic, "Hey, how are things? Good to see ya, you'll be a wonderful help" spiel. They say that her boat must have been fast because they were not expecting her arrival so soon. They can get her started on work tomorrow, but for now they recommend her getting situated on the island and resting. She accepts the suggestion, saying that she wants to go stretch her legs. Trifa and Yuma offer to show her around town and she accepts, prompting the three to leave. The Albions retreat to their little sanctuary and play Adam's message. In it, Adam says he's trusting them as old friends to help him save the White Fang from a wave of moderation trickling into the organization. Onryo being overthrown has upset a plan that has and will benefit the White Fang greatly, and he needs their help to ensure the White Fang's continued success. He tells them that they're to use their unique way with words to slander Gira Belladonna and tarnish his reputation. Then, when he's at his lowest point, make sure he'll no longer be a factor. The message shuts off and the Albions are left to meditate. The two figure out very quickly that Adam intends to coup Sienna, and with Sienna out and Gira unable to challenge it, Adam will easily fill a power vacuum. They question quite sarcastically what they should do before agreeing that they'll follow Adam's plan, to an extent. They muse about Sister Ilya and how horrible it would be if she got herself wrapped up in Adam's worldview, becoming so subservient to him. Yes, the other brother agrees. It seems once Gira is out of the way, they'll have to turn her and Adam into the Kingdom authorities, leaving another vacuum that they could take the place of. They begin to laugh, and we slowly dissolve over Ilya saying goodbye to Trifa and Yuma. She eyes the Belladonna household in the distance and takes a deep breath before approaching it. She knocks on the front door, and Sun and Gira can be heard arguing about who's going to get the door, with Sun winning out because he's simply closer to it. He opens the door and greets her, and we get a nice little chuckle moment where Ilya questions if she has the correct house or not. She says that she's an old friend here to see Blake, and Sun and Gira welcome her in. While Gira goes to get Blake, Sun and Ilya sit around the table and an awkward silence ensues. Ilya asks who Sun is, and he explains that he's a friend of Blake's from Beacon. She pushes a little further, asking, so, like, boyfriend from Beacon? And he just chokes on his tea like he did with Callie. He sputters that they're not a couple, not that he would mind getting together with Blake. They did go to the dance together and had a great time, but he recognizes Blake isn't really in the headspace for a relationship after everything that's happened. He asks when Blake and Ilya met, and Ilya openly admits that they met while in the White Fang when they were younger, around 11 or 12. Blake's one of her oldest friends. Sun sours it and narrows his eyes, muttering, "White Fang," under his breath as Blake comes into the room. She's surprised to see Ilya, and a little uncomfortable when Ilya just stares at Blake a little longer than platonic friends probably should. Gira, who followed Blake, offers to get another cup of tea in order to extract himself from the conversation. Blake sits down next to Sun, and Ilya comments how lovely the house is, and Blake wryly remarks that it's what happens when your dad becomes chieftain. The two sit in silence, and Sun actively calls out how awkward the atmosphere is. Ilya apologizes and says that she would have called ahead if she knew Blake's scroll number. Blake says that she ditched hers on the train to Vale so Adam couldn't track her. That seems to give Ilya a figurative kick in the ass, and she finally asks Blake why she left the White Fang. Blake recalls that she saw the changes that were happening in the Fang, the more violent tactics. And even though she went along with them, there was always something in the back of her mind that told her that it was the wrong path to take. Adam. Adam became the breaking point because at some point he went from someone she trusted on an instinctual level to being a monster willing to kill indiscriminately to get what he wants. And the worst part is, she saw all of those symptoms slowly spreading through the entire White Fang, despite what Fennec and Corsic have been saying about it being localized to the Vale unit. She's hopeful, hearing the news that Sienna is in charge. The woman always had a good head on her shoulders, and while she was always more extreme than Blake, she had a conscience and a moral barometer. Ilya shakes her head, saying that while her stomach churns knowing some of the things they've had to do while in the Fang, she thinks of all the successes they've had as a result of it. Consumer discrimination in Mistral down 30% and falling, the At Legion Faunus work bill, cutting the pay gap in Vale. All of those were accomplished while Onryo took a more aggressive stance as their leader. Blake immediately asks what the cost of that was. Hate crimes across all the kingdoms rose. She's seen how the White Fang became the scapegoat for racists to torture normal Faunus. People were learning to fear the Faunus, not respect them. Ilya snarls that the humans should be afraid because that's how the Faunus had to live for centuries. It's only right that they get their just desserts. Blake stands, raising her voice, and asks, "So what? An eye for an eye now? That's barbaric! We'll all go blind!" To which Ilya replies, "At least if we're all blind, we'll be equal." Sun actually interjects at this moment, contemplating the analogy mangling, and raises the point that that's not how the analogy works to Ilya, who simply barks at him to shut up. She stands and pokes Blake in the chest, saying that once the White Fang is in charge of things, the world will be a better place. Blake asks better how? Better like the Vale Breach, or the fall of Beacon? And Ilya replies that if the humans fail to recognize them, then yes, like the Breach, like Beacon. Blake gasps at her, pointing out that Ilya is advocating genocide, and Ilya throws out, "Better them than us!" Blake is appalled, and tries to explain that it's not how anything works, that humans and Faunus are in the world together and need each other, but Ilya pulls back and can't believe what she's hearing. After everything they'd experienced together in the Fang, after everything that Ilya told Blake about her parents dying in the Atlas mines, after hearing about Ilya's school friends laughing at the mineshaft collapse, she thought Blake and her understood each other. Blake equally can't believe what she's hearing either. Ilya sounds just like Adam, justifying her hatred because she was personally affected by a small group of evil people. Ilya yells that Adam's right. All humans do are mock, degrade, and enslave the Faunus, and if Blake can't see that, then she really is a lost cause. Ilya glares at Blake, heartbreak written all over her face as she tears up. Her voice, however, maintains the anger and doesn't waver. "I thought you were one of us." Blake replies, tired, "I don't think I was ever one of you." Ilya shakes her head and stomps to the door, muttering, "Adam was right. They filled your head with garbage." Outside the Belladonna household, Ilya stands in place and holds back her emotions, swallowing them down before walking onward, Blake watching from the doorway the entire time. From the side, Callie and Gira pop in, commenting that conversation didn't particularly go well, to which Blake reacts with indignance that they were eavesdropping on her. Without hesitation, they both answer yes, and Blake leaves with a groan. We swap over to Patch, where Yang and Neptune are doing some light sparring as part of their rehab. Occasionally, one of Yang's punches with her mechanical arm will go off target and she'll have to make some kind of adjustments, and equally, Neptune has to ask for breaks to sit down and rest his back. None of this stops Neptune from remarking how sluggish Yang has been the last few days, and he wonders aloud, if a little insensitively, if she's thinking about Blake. She snaps at him to shut up and flexes to punch him before self-regulating and cooling down. That doesn't stop her hair from flickering with some fire though. This is when Ty steps in and comments how things have been tense around rehab lately, but he's hoping that having a new friend along for the ride may break the ice. He asks the two to say hello to their newest rehab buddy, Jane, and when he steps aside, we find Neo using her umbrella like a cane. We see Yang's eyes widen and flicker just as she launches forward, and smoothly pins Neo to the wall. The minute they make contact, the screen goes to black, ending the episode. And we'll leave that there for today. I'd like to thank everyone for watching this third installment, and I hope you'll return when I release the next one, hopefully within some kind of timely fashion. Remember, if you like my take on RWBY, you should subscribe to the channel, ring that bell, and pass this video series on to any friends you may think might like it. And of course, don't forget to follow me on my Patreon. For $1 or more, you get access to the Team Frostbite Discord server, The Tundra, where I, as well as other YouTubers such as FamtanFalling and Dashi Lee, interact with our followers on the regular. Remember to also follow me on Twitter for the newest updates to my channel and all the content I'll be covering going forward. One more note, I do have a book, Forged Within Flames, an interconnected series of short stories, available now in digital and print on Amazon. Please give it a look if you ever feel up to it. But that's enough for now. I'll catch you all in the next episode.